Chapter 1850, For the Rotation Ends. Belit suffered a loss in his first fight with Liangyu. She looked at her hair that had turned to ashes, with a hint of disbelief in her eyes, but then she burst into laughter. A martial artist from Huashu country? I have heard of him. She turned around, carried the bloody iron cross battle axe, which was so huge that it was disproportionate to her body, on her shoulder, and looked at Liangyu with crazy eyes. You people of Huashu country always like to talk about your 5,000 years of history. Let me see what level your so-called kung fu that has been passed down for 5,000 years is in actual combat. Liangyu looked at the knife in his hand and put it away calmly. As a veteran warrior in Asgard, Belit's fighting ability was indeed impressive. Her long-awaited sword strike failed to cut off the opponent's head. However, she could only use the sword drawing slash once, as the opponent would not give her another chance to build up momentum. This also means that the guy in front of him is not easy to deal with. In the duel between enhanced aliens, the choice of weapons is crucial. The Tang sword is fast, but it is not conducive to weapon collision. It can only have an absolute advantage when facing the Japanese samurai sword. Her battle axe was so powerful and heavy that even if the Tang sword in Liangyu's hand was made of metal, it would probably be damaged after colliding with the opponent's weapon many times. So, when facing Belit, who is also a reinforcement type and has full defense, speed, and physical strength, blunt weapons are a better choice. She inserted Long Ming into the crater with her backhand, and then took out 4 red metal sticks from the weapon box behind her. Crack. 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 With a skillful connection, the 4 metal sticks turned into a gun more than 2 meters long in her hands. The gun Liangyu used was very heavy. The thick gun body was like a long, thick metal stick, which was very useful for impacting and smashing. The sharp tip of the gun also has powerful armor-piercing capabilities. Among the 18 kinds of weapons of Huashu State, the spear is known as the king of all weapons. In the era of cold weapons, it has always been the most powerful and commonly used weapon on the battlefield. In the past, Liangyu rarely used a gun in combat because it was inconvenient to carry. Moreover, it was much more difficult to make than a knife. So later, Lu Karen specially made this spear, Liao Yuan, for her. When facing a non-enhanced mutant, the use of a knife is light and convenient. Just let her find an opportunity to get close to you, and she will kill you with one blow. But today, she had the rare opportunity to meet a martial artist, which gave her the opportunity to use a gun. When I was practicing actual combat, the boxing I was most proficient in was Bajikwan. I started learning martial arts at the age of 3. My great master of Bajikwan was the famous spearman Li Shuwen. I have been following the teachings of this school for more than 20 years and have never slacked off for even a single day. Bajikwan evolved from spear techniques. So the stronger my fist techniques are, the stronger my spear techniques are. Liangyu raised the spear in her hand with one hand and pointed it at Belit. The tip of the spear had a red tassel that slowly fluttered in the air as the volcanic wind blew. It flew faster and faster, and finally it was spinning at a high speed like a windmill. But what was spinning was not just Hongying, but the gun in Liangyu's hand. Liangyu moved, and this time she took the initiative to attack. The distance between the two was less than 100 meters, and it was like a close combat. In an instant, they could deliver their weapons to the opponent. The spear broke through the air and went straight to Belit's throat fiercely. The fierce force and extremely fast speed triggered a series of sonic booms, and Liangyu's body turned into a group of overlapping afterimages.
Kill.
Liangyu's gun was infinitely magnified in front of Belit's eyes. The madness in Belit's eyes turned into a tremendous fighting spirit, and he swung the giant axe in his hand fiercely forward. Boom! The enormous force stirred up a violent storm, and the battle axe was about to knock the gun in Liangyu's hand directly away. But just as the weapons were about to come into contact, the gun in Liangyu's hand seemed to come to life. It suddenly bent, and then began to shake like a snake. It bloomed like a flower in Liangyu's hand, easily dodged the battle axe, and then hit the blunt side of the battle axe with a backhand to dissipate the force. The two forces intertwined, and Belit was tilted by the force. His body became unstable in an instant, and the battle axe in his hand suddenly fell into the air. At this moment, the tip of the gun seemed to have life again. It was clearly smashing the battle axe just now, but the gun body was bent into a huge arc. At this moment, it used the force to rebound and stabbed towards Bolit's throat again. The gun is also called the thief among soldiers, because after mastering the skill, it can produce endless changes and even make it twist and shake like a soft weapon. Once the gun is shaken out, it changes in thousands of ways and is hard to defend against. When had Bolit ever seen such a weapon? In the era of hot weapons, this king of cold weapons on the battlefield has long been eliminated. Only a martial arts fanatic like Liang Yu would persist in training for years. A martial arts master doesn't just talk the talk, he really trains day in and day out for decades. If it weren't for the end of the world, Liang Yu would never have the chance to kill the enemy with a gun in his life. Collapse. Bolit quickly dodged her head, trying to avoid the sharp tip of the gun, but she could dodge the attack of the gun tip piercing her throat, but she could not avoid the gun that passed by the side of her face and suddenly turned to hit her head. Liang Yu only needed to exert a little force on the 2-meter-long gun, and the gun tip at the other end hit Bolit's face like a python. Bang! She was blown away like a top and fell heavily into the lava. However, Liang Yu knew that this magma, with a temperature of thousands of degrees Celsius, could not kill an enhanced Epsilon-level mutant. So, she jumped into the crater without any hesitation. Boom! As soon as Bolit stabilized her body, she rushed towards Liang Yu with a large amount of hot magma. She opened her arms and let go of her weapon. She planned to engage in close combat with Liang Yu, but Liang Yu would never give her this opportunity. The gun was shaking in front of her, leaving many afterimages, blocking all of Bolit's attack angles. Seeing the right moment, a simple straight stab went straight through Bolit's throat. Ka! A mouthful of blood suddenly spurted out of Bolit's mouth, and he looked at Liang Yu in front of him with disbelief. Her body was held up by Liang Yu's spear and suspended in the air, and soon her eyes lost their luster. "You should be proud enough to allow me to use my second move," Liang Yu said in a cold voice. "You should know that Li Shuwen, the Bajikwan master at that time, was known for his hard fist, and he would never use a second move when fighting with others. In close combat, Liang Yu has never lost unless he encounters an existence with a supernatural power index far stronger than his own. Because from the perspective of martial arts, she is almost invincible. So no matter how strong Bolit's brute force is, or how skillful she thinks she is in using weapons, but in front of a master who has been studying martial arts for decades, all of these seem too childish." Another battlefield. The third most important person in Fremon's Palace of the Gods, the moon god Chernobog, appears here. In the last battle, his opponent was an alien from a small country in Northern Europe. But winning that battle was not easy. Without the leading ability index and intelligence advantage, such a battle would test his luck and experience and skills in encounters. But in the end, he still won. He had some wounds on his body at this time, but for a strengthening mutant, these were not a big deal. When he arrived at the site of the second battle, he found his feet wet. When I looked down, I saw that I was in a swamp. The ground was muddy, the water level wasn't even high enough to cover his ankles, and the mud was full of lush green plants. Looking around, there is a swamp like this all around. The setting sun and dusk scene are very beautiful. Well, let's see who my opponent is this time. Chernobog licked his tongue and looked around excitedly. But after looking through it, he still couldn't find anyone. Hidden? In a place like this? Chernobog took out the moon blade with both hands, and any movement in the air could not escape his perception. But suddenly, he sensed a hint of unusual energy. Something is approaching.
No.
Close? Perhaps it cannot be described as close. It was as if something was right next to him. But when he turned around and looked around, he couldn't find where the other person was. But his feeling was not wrong. There was indeed something near him. Invisible? Distorted light? Illusion? A space alien? No, none of them. The feeling of having someone by your side is real and not an illusion. Buzz. A slight vibration appeared beside him. The sound was very faint, but for a top-level enhancement mutant, he could hear it clearly even if it was a breeze on his face. He suddenly lowered his head and saw a ripple in the swamp beneath his feet, spreading rapidly around with his feet as the center. Chernobog understood something in an instant, and he suddenly exploded and flew towards the sky. At the same time, an unimaginably huge mouthpart suddenly emerged from the mud of the swamp and closed in the middle as if the ground was broken. It was an indescribable abyss mouth, with densely packed fangs growing inside the dark throat, biting down fiercely at Chernobog. Chernobog felt a chill on his back, but fortunately, he had a keen sense and quickly used the jet device to fly into the sky. Boom! The moment the mouthparts closed, there was a deafening roar like an earthquake. The monster that crawled out of the mud gradually revealed its true form. It turned out to be a huge and hideous monster that had never been seen before. Its body is too huge, even larger than the super-large mechanical life forms of mechanical civilization. It rolled out from the mud. Its skin was dark, as cold as steel, and its surface was sticky. Dozens of huge and thick tentacles were dancing on its body, but its upper body could not be characterized by any creature, with 3 heads embedded in its fat body and a dozen dark green eyes. It was like an octopus merged with some genetically modified monster, and then an even more bizarre and weird creature was born. Its appearance was so distorted that it looked like it was made by a baby who had just learned to play with clay. Chernobog looked at his opponent and racked his brains, but couldn't think of any alien in the world who had the posture of a sea monster. No matter who it is, just kill him, and it's over. The shadow of the moon on Chernobog's forehead began to shine. He raised the moon blade with both hands, and his figure began to become illusory in midair. The moon was shining brightly, and the human figure was like the moon shadow, as if in a dream. However, the blade was filled with the fiercest murderous intent as it swooped down towards the huge monster. The monster's attack failed, and more than a dozen eyes were staring at the bald stranger in front of it. Moo! A long and distant roar came from its mouth, somewhat like the growl of a cow, but the sound was mixed with a terrifying, bone-chilling chill. Because of this roar, the entire swamp country underwent drastic changes. Drops of water quickly shot up into the sky and turned into transparent curtains on all sides. Dozens, hundreds, thousands of transparent curtains are so beautiful that they even give people the illusion of transparent plastic sheets being stretched out and hung up. Around the monster, the water flows converged to form huge waterspouts one after another. Chernobog roared and slashed down the flowing water curtain in front of him with the moon's shadow blade in his hand. He smashed through the layers of curtains, but his body felt as if it was stuck in sticky glue. The strength that was enough to split mountains and rocks was also removed layer by layer. Chernobog realized something was wrong. After the end of the world, he fought against the water aliens for the first time. Because in the cold winter, there are no longer any aliens who use water to fight. So he was not used to it, and even forgot that no matter how strong he was, he could not cut through the softest water. It wasn't until his power was stripped away layer by layer that he realized he had made a foolish choice. Before he could figure it out, a roar sounded in his ears. He looked up and saw dozens of huge water tornadoes rolling towards him. No, we must not fall into his territory. Chernobog tried to retreat without hesitation, but there was only an endless swamp under his feet and no place to exert force. Forced into a corner, he activated the propulsion device in his combat suit, pushing him to flee far away. Behind him, the huge sea beast was still roaring, and the water in the entire swamp was converging more and more violently. Boom! Crash! The sound of the water splashing was too loud and not pleasant to the ear. It even sounded like a broken gong being struck in the ear. When Chernobog turned around, he saw a huge tsunami rolling down like an endless city wall. Damn it! Chernobog fled for his life, knowing that he could not fight the enemy in such an area. But he couldn't imagine who could cause such a huge flow of water in such a swamp area. Chernobog tried his best to escape, but he had no power to use, and relying only on the propulsion device, he could not maintain flight for long. Fremon's combat uniform technology was not as advanced as that of Zhang Yi's team, and he was soon blocked by one waterspout after another.
Ah!
Chernobog was shocked and angry. He held the moon blade in both hands and burst out with his powerful strength. Laugh. Using the moon blade as a medium, he transformed his supernatural energy into a blade that cut through the flowing water. But using brute force to fight against the gentle water is meaningless. His strength is indeed strong, but even the top boxer will only hurt himself if he hits the air, not others. The sea monster was chasing after them. It was hundreds of meters tall, looking down at the top human psychics who were struggling in the endless tide. Show. The red moon shadows were densely packed, trying to cut a path through the water curtains. But more and more water walls gathered around Chernobog. In the entire swamp world, it seemed that all water elements were gathered in this area. Transparent water curtains blocked the entire space. Chernobog tried to break through their blockade. However, for water, it only needs to be thick enough to dissipate all the forces in the world. The highest good is like water. The softest has the highest tolerance. Even the sharpest blade cannot cut a clear spring. Chernobog's roar was gradually swallowed up by the ocean-like water until his body was completely submerged. When Zhang Yi appeared in the prepared White Room, most of the battle was over. After 2 rounds of screening, less than 20 people remained. All members of the Fukiage Force and the God Squad were wiped out. This is not surprising at all. They did not succeed in the past with their own abilities, so it is impossible for them to defeat the already powerful aliens in a short period of time with powers that do not belong to them. What's more, superpowers also come in different levels. The gap in talent between the bishop level, chariot level, and soldier level in humans below Epsilon is enormous. Even when the ability index is the same, there will be huge differences in actual combat capabilities. Zhang Yi scanned the faces of the people in the room one by one. Deng Shintong, Uncle Yu, Fatty Su, Zhou Ke, and others are no longer here, which is not surprising. But he didn't expect that Yang Xinxin and Lu Karen could reach this level smoothly. Their speed is faster than Zhang Yi, which may be related to the opponents they met. The two seem to have been waiting for Zhang Yi for a long time. As soon as they saw Zhang Yi coming into the White Room, they ran to him excitedly. This scene attracted the attention of many people. Zhang Yi remained calm and first observed the reactions of the people around him. The rules set by the administrators do not allow fighting outside of the trial levels. Otherwise, this place would not be so peaceful. Zhang Yi hugged Yang Xinxin and Lu Karen. All right, you guys are awesome. You've made it this far. Zhang Yi's face was full of relief. It's not that he didn't trust their abilities, it's just that in the past, the two of them had only assisted him in battle. I didn't expect that I could perform so well even when fighting independently this time. Lu Qian raised her little face with a sunny smile, and her mouthful of white teeth reflected the dazzling light. Hee, I'm lucky. My opponent in the first battle was a stranger from the Celestial team. My opponent in the second battle was Lancelot from the Knights of the Round Table. I defeated them easily. When Zhang Yi heard the name Lancelot, he couldn't help but be surprised. Back in the underground demon kingdom in the southwest region, Lancelot had once brought him some pressure. I thought that the guy who could fight with him back and forth was actually defeated by Lu Karen. Lu Karen raised her hand proudly. At this moment, her whole body was wrapped in a layer of white armor. The small snowy owl is made of memory metal and is hidden in a metal box behind her. Only a small face the size of a palm is exposed, and at first glance, one might even think she is a mechanical life form. My snow owl has a great advantage here. Its combat system is already very mature, and I also discovered... She looked around, pulled Zhang Yi and Yang Xinxin over, and whispered, "The restrictions on the armed forces of machines here are not as great as those on aliens. I can use overclocking to briefly burst out combat capabilities that exceed 10,000 points of supernatural power index. This is actually based on a similar principle to Deng Shintong's injection of drugs." Zhang Yi nodded in understanding. A super mecha that can fly, hide, and dive, with a mechanical body made entirely of metal, loaded with a large number of super-era weapons and a monster that can draw a sword and fight like a human. To be honest, in a one-on-one battle where the ability index must be limited to 10,000 points, it is indeed too buggy. Apart from a monster like Zhang Yi who is immune to almost all attacks from thermal weapons, it is hard to imagine anyone who can easily defeat Liu Karen head-on. Zhang Yi looked at Yang Xinxin. Xinxin, how did you win these 2 battles? Even though she has been promoted to Ypsilon, the conditions for using Yang Xinxin's abilities are still very harsh. The improvement of her life level cannot solve her own fragility problem. Normally, Zhang Yi would ask Huahua or Liang Yu to protect her closely. But how did she do it this time? Yang Xinxin didn't explain much, just tapped her head with her finger. Use your brain. Zhang Yi laughed. Smart people naturally have their own way of fighting, so there is no need to ask more questions. In short, among the people present now, 3 are on their side. This was also due to the fact that Zhang Yi had Mu Yan, a 4-dimensional human bag, and brought in a large number of aliens from the Huaxu Kingdom. Therefore, even if calculated through mathematical probability, the number of people in their team who finally passed the duel trial must be the largest among all the alien teams. I wonder if anyone else can come. More people is always a good thing. The figures of Huahua, Liang Yu, and Deng Shintong flashed through Zhang Yi's mind. But in the end, he still felt that it would be difficult for Huahua to pass this trial. Huahua is a war beast after all. If he encounters a world-class strongman, he will suffer in terms of combat thinking and weapon application. There is almost no hope of getting to the back. The point is, with its wild fighting style, if it could have passed the trial, it would have come out long ago.